On this week's episode of Three Dad Bods, Carl, you brought up 9/11, and to be honest with you, that was probably the turning point when I decided I cannot trust the media.
I remember the days where not every Sunday morning, my dad was out in his underwear out in the front yard, picking out the newspaper because he couldn't wait to get that sports section.
Sarcastic, witty, and not afraid to mix it up. Pop open a cold one and welcome to Three Dad Bods.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Three Dad Bods with Brent, Carl, and Sean. Good day, gentlemen. I use that term very loosely.
Well, some of us are more loose than others.
And some more lay.
Yeah.
You said you were loose. What do you mean loose?
Just relaxed.
I think it's more screws loose for him, buddy.
I'm glad you're relaxed.
I have a question for you guys as we begin here today. All this talk about the Ukraine, about Israel, you hear one story from one side, another story from another side. Some stories are like almost right in the middle. Like how in today's news, where there's so many freaking sources, and you have so many reporters that go anonymous, it's more and more these days. Like anybody could be a reporter. I could be a reporter. Sean could be a reporter. Carl could be a reporter. Who do you know who to trust anymore? It seemed like as a kid, at least young kid, and granted, we didn't really understand what was going on in the world outside of our own neighborhood during those days, but I feel like people relied or trusted the news more then. And today, I'll be honest with you guys, and I used to kid around and say, look, unless it's on ESPN, I don't trust it or I don't ever know about it. But even on ESPN these days, I mean, that's a rough network right now. Like, where do you guys go for news?
Yeah. I think a lot of people are even just using Twitter or X now, I guess they call it, too. They just post tweets. That's the news. Like, no, it's not.
Yeah. Like, oh, I read a tweet. That's true. No, it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to know.
Wrong?
It's hard to know who to listen to and who's got an agenda. It seems like everybody has an agenda, or that we're witnessing political activism within journalism. So, I mean, there's quite a few examples of that over the last few years. I remember seeing a news report about some flooding down in Florida a couple years ago. There was a hurricane. I can't remember which one it was. But the guy, he works for CNN, Anderson Cooper. I remember seeing him reporting about this flooding that was happening in the Tampa Bay area. And then there were some pictures that came out where it showed him waist deep in a ditch. And his news producers were standing 20 feet from him, and they were barely ankle deep. Have you guys seen that picture?
I've seen something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
isn't Anderson Cooper related to the Vanderbilts? Isn't that what I heard one time?
Yeah, his mother.
This is
something
a mother
like that. I don't think it's the Vanderbilt. I think it's I think she's a
Rockefeller.
No, somebody that
related to like big
money,
some makeup line or something like that. Fashion.
I believe he's disowned too.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know much about the guy. Just that he's whatever. So I mean, so you hear from different sides of the equation. A lot of conservative people say oh, you can't trust CNN for anything. And then on the other side of the aisle, you can't trust Fox News for anything. And then there's the in-betweens, the ABCs of the world.
OAM.
Brian Williams, do you remember him getting in trouble for lying about getting shot down in a helicopter in Iraq?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. That. And then what's his name? What's that goofball's name from Fox News that got caught lying?
Hannity?
Which
He got
one?
caught lying about something.
Which
No, I'm
one?
thinking about Bill O'Reilly. He got, so he and not Anderson Cooper, but Brian Williams, they're like little
Peas in a
war
pod.
story liar bedfellows. He lied about something regarding, so I think it was when England was fighting the Falkland War or something like that.
Didn't happen with Tom Brokaw too? Isn't that why he was, or Dan Rather? One of those.
Dan
two?
Rather got caught lying about something George Bush did. I think he reported about George Bush and his cocaine habits or something like that, and it was either greatly exaggerated or it was a complete fabrication. I can't remember which.
And
I think
look,
I think it was exaggerated because I believe that Bush had admitted that he did experiment with cocaine.
Yeah, and every time I did coke with George, it never was an extraordinary amount.
Just a little, just a tiny amount, right?
2 or 3 lines.
But
that
Carl, Carl, you posted a link last night as we were talking and stuff, and it seems like to me that if you're looking at a news source and you agree with everything that is on there, I feel like that is not a reliable source. I think that a reliable source should have items that you don't agree with and items that you do agree with, because that's a reality thing. Like, I shouldn't agree to everything that is out there because the world doesn't function like that. There has to be things that I disagree with.
I think in the old days, you're right. I think that's what journalism was all about in the beginning. It was to give you 2 sides of any perspective or story, and then let the person that's listening to the story determine what they believe about that story. Instead, we are opinionizing or editorializing every story a particular way, a particular bias, or a way a corporation wants it to be. Like Sean was talking about Fox. Now, who does Fox's numbers come from generally? Let's look at reality. Who are the ones that usually watch Fox?
Like the back.
Usually conservative,
older
Republican
voters, right?
voters, yeah.
People who don't have streaming
Murdoch
ability, that don't go on the internet as much, like you.
I think now it's considered to be an older person's news source.
Mm-hmm. And then who goes to CNN?
I don't think very many people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's generally considered a left-leaning organization, right?
You want to be scared. Guess where most Gen Zs get their news?
Twitter and Facebook?
TikTok.
Oh, gosh. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
It's like huge for Gen Z. So, yeah, you guys are right. I mean, Brent, you made a good point. And the question is, when did it change? How did it change?
I don't know if you guys ever watched Bill Maher in the past, but it used to be I couldn't stand him. I thought he was far left. I thought
he was
way out there. But then, like, the more and more that I began to listen to him, and I don't know if he's evolved or if he's just tired of everything, who maybe was pushing him from the back, and he's like, screw this, I'm going to say it as but as I've listened to him more, yes, there's points I disagree with, but there's also a lot of points that I agree with him with also. And he, I don't know, to him, like him and the Joe Rogans fit that mold of who I at least listen to as far as dependable sources and listen to the thoughts that they project. And again, I don't agree with all their stuff, but I can understand their stuff too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. When was the last time that you guys felt like you were getting a straight scoop from the news? I thought 9/11, we were, except Brent will disagree with me. But I mean, based on maybe what they were hearing, the government could have been involved in the conspiracy. But
I'll be honest with you, Carl. I'll be honest with you.
So you take that away from things, to just take the government conspiracy stuff away.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, and I think what you're referring to, Carl, is there was a lot of come togetherness from both sides of whatever, and
I'll agree with that.
Seems like people wanted to just have this straight just everything straight. What's happening? What's going on? And regardless of, like I said, some conspiracy ideas on that, I think people pretty much came together and were
Look,
unified, and there wasn't a divergence.
I mean,
there.
I remember back in the 80s when Ronald Reagan would come on and do a presidential speech. I mean, all the networks,
Everything stopped.
including even the ones my dad was always mad at, all a bunch of liberal bastards. Even those networks sorry, Dad, but even those networks would broadcast the speech, right, guys? You'd hear the whole speech. They wouldn't like cut away. They wouldn't edit. Well, they'd still do their little speech after the
I
three
don't remember
heads.
the
and-
speech
Well,
after though.
But
I don't remember that.
Usually after his televised speeches, I think they had a
I
rebuttal.
don't remember that happening.
Rebuttal?
A rebuttal
I-
from the other
You don't
side.
remember the rebuttal? Brett?
I don't remember that happening until the 90s.
Well, I think, Sean, I
don't-
think State of the Unions, there was
I could-
always a rebuttal.
Maybe I'm conflating. Yeah, I could be conflating the two.
They
I don't
still
know.
do that, but no one broadcasts it.
Carl, you brought up 9/11, and to be honest with you, that was probably the turning point when I decided I cannot trust the media. I'll
Really?
be honest with you. Yeah, that was probably the turning point in my life where I was like, everything I'm hearing is just dog shit.
Did you feel like that was a conspiracy right from the get-go?
I had a lot of questions that were not being
Okay.
asked. There was, right at the beginning, there was the report of the tower collapsing while the tower was still up, and then it collapsed. Like, I remember seeing that. I'm like,
Right.
so there were a lot of things, but you combine 9/11 with, like you guys were talking about, where it brought everybody together. And I think the primary focus during then wasn't, it had just happened and you weren't taking time to dissect everything. You were
Right.
pissed off. You were
Yeah.
upset. You wanted blood. You wanted revenge. How can somebody come into my country and do this to our people? That's what that feeling was at that point. And it wasn't until the smoke started to clear, pardon the pun.
Well, part of it was a rescue effort too. Like I remember that
Yes.
story about the guy that came from Wisconsin with his dog all the way across the country.
Right.
And he was looking through the rubble, and then how they rescued that one guy. I mean, you were glued
Yes,
to the TV
absolutely.
set because
Yeah.
you want that guy
And-
to get saved, right?
And despite what
Yeah,
I say
absolutely.
about all
Every-
that, it's despite my feelings about what had really happened, those events happened. Firefighters lost their lives. Firefighters brought people down, went back up, brought people down, went back up, and never
yeah.
came down again. That happened. I will never, ever dispute that. That heroes lost their lives saving other people.
Mhm.
The other stuff I will obviously debate
Oh, I know. We're
to my
going
last
to
breath.
disegree probably the rest of our lives.
Power
So
7.
that's okay.
So
All right.
can you guys think of any examples of the media distorting truth in those examples, like 9/11 or
Yeah, right after. Okay, I think the manipulation and the propaganda began generating because I think there's someone that's pushing behind the scenes. Like I think George Bush and his administration wanted a war in Iraq. It's inconvenient that it was Afghanistan where
Had the back
Osama
door.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he got his war though, because he had, like Brent said, everybody was wanting blood. Everybody was like, oh, we need to revenge on someone. And Afghanistan was just a bunch of goat herders that had happened to have some AK-47s. And that didn't take long. We knocked them out in like, you watch 12 Angry Goats or whatever that movie was, where the special forces team goes in and takes
12
out like
Angry
400
Goats?
crazy Afghanis. But
12 Angry Goats?
oh, I don't know, 12 something. 12 men on horses. I don't know. It's a good war movie. We got some Australian guy playing the lead captain for U.S. Special Forces team. Thor. He's in it. So it's
I haven't
awesome.
seen that.
Yeah, you guys should watch it. It's good.
As I get older, some of the stuff really frightens me of what's true and what's not. I think we, as we become older, understand that a lot of the things we were even taught in school weren't necessarily how it happened. I've come to the South, I understand the Civil War and what we were taught, but I also understand it's more than just what we learned in school. There's a whole bunch of other things about states' rights versus federal rights, and there's a lot more to things. And so the frightening thing is when you start to question, then you start to think about, well, what about World War II? What don't we know about World War II? What don't we know about World War I?
Well, look at Vietnam. Did you guys ever watch We Are Soldiers? At the end of that movie, the press is flown in after the big battle. There's this heap of dead Vietnamese, North Korean or North Vietnamese. And
I haven't seen that.
The one reporter that was with them the whole time was just shaking his head at the gaggle of reporters that came in and, oh, U.S. won this incredible war, killed all these people and took very few. Oh, no, they didn't. They got hammered pretty hard too.
Right.
And war sucks. And they
Yeah.
glorify anyway. And I think, Brent, I think you're right. I think that over the years that whatever sells newspapers is what's going to be on that newspaper.
And gains support.
What's that?
And drives the support.
Right.
If you don't have a country backing, you're not going to get what you want out of it. You know what I mean? Like,
you want to talk about World War II era? You can go back in some of the. You go just think about some of the movies that are produced about living in that time frame, and people were going to movie theaters to get news. The newsreels, right? The newsreels that they would play before a movie, and they would go through and they would talk about this or that, and it was always something
patriotic and generic.
Yeah, patriotic,
the
and
music
pushing,
in the background.
Right.
Very so
an
American.
push war bond sales, right? That was a big thing.
Yep.
Training.
Yeah.
So in Iwo Jima, you remember the raising of the flag of Iwo Jima. One of the guys that did that was an Arizona Navajo, and they took him and drug him around the country for the sole purpose of selling war bonds. And I think he ended up, I don't know, just that for some reason, I don't remember all the details, but that kind of messed him up a little bit. And so there's propaganda from all sides. It's just hard to know what's true and what's
Well, this is what I was trying to say the other night, and I did last night when we were doing our prep for this show, and I said it the wrong way, but remember when FDR was president? He had polio.
I wasn't
I
alive
don't
then.
remember.
And okay. FDR had polio, and when he was elected, he would have the Secret Service and whoever his people were make sure he's standing up.
Yeah,
Every video and every picture.
And the press completely
was in
complied
on it.
with it. Yes, they were in on it.
There was a trip to England where he put himself at great risk with Nazi U-boats that could have sunk. We weren't at war yet with them, but if the Nazis had sunk Churchill and Roosevelt on the same ship, I mean, American people would have went, "What are you doing?" Because at that time we were very isolationist. We did not want to be in that war. We did not want our soldiers, our people,
want to be in World War I either.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was talk that Roosevelt manipulated the Chinese and Japanese and denied Japan the ability to get oil they needed and pushed us into that Pearl Harbor situation. I mean, if the reporters had really done their job, would they have really helped our country, or could they have hurt our country? Because if Japan or Germany had won that war, the world would be a completely different place and not necessarily a good place either.
Well,
right?
I think about this too. Sean, I don't know if you remember from Cyprus, but there was a teacher, photography teacher, Mr. Kimura, George Kimura.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, Japanese guy,
I
one of the
remember him.
coolest people.
Great guy. Everybody loved that guy. He was so nice.
As a kid, he was one of the Japanese rounded up, put into these camps One of
Yeah.
those was in Utah, wasn't it? I believe
Mm-hmm.
In
in
Tooele.
like Dugway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a huge one in Tooele.
And so when the
terrible.
war happened, they rounded up all the Japanese people and put
In the
them
country.
regardless of
Yep.
what
Didn't
your
matter.
background was, what
Mhm.
your standing was,
Mhm.
anything. So how was that? Now, obviously, we weren't putting them into incinerators and killing them in there, but you're rounding up a group of people and separating them from the general public.
There was a very small differentiation of what happened in Germany with the Jews and what happened in the U.S. with the Japanese internment camps.
Yeah.
Very small. They weren't forced into labor, and they weren't obviously murdered and starved to death,
Right.
but they were still in prison.
And they
This
were
is still
US
violated the
citizens.
I
constitutional
mean, it
rights.
was a complete violation of the Constitution by
Right.
FDR.
And
And they
how
didn't
many
do that to
stories
the
have we heard of-
Germans.
And-
They
and
didn't do
I-
that to German citizens
they
of the
didn't at
United
all.
States.
They didn't, and or Italians.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
None
if
of
it wasn't
Any-
for
you
him,
could have,
I
as
honestly
long
would not
as
have known
you-
about it without George telling us about that in class.
yeah.
Well, and you didn't hear the
George
press.
Takei was, isn't that his name? George Takei?
Yeah.
The guy that plays,
Star Trek.
Star Trek dude. He was in that too.
Was he?
Well, that's
So, yeah.
Now this is the question. I think, okay, the press back in that time could claim, and I'm not unempathetic to the claim, that they did that out of respect and the security of the country.
But
But
you
then
get the
during
Italians
Vietnam-
and the Germans then.
I should say
You're talking more about covering up the fact that FTR had
that
polio.
and not reporting. I mean, okay, what if they made a big deal about the Japanese intern camps during World War II? It would have been the right thing to do. But would
Yeah,
it
of
have
course.
But would it have helped the war effort at all, Sean? No.
I don't really know. And it's really, what's really sad is we're having this conversation about this, and we don't have very many people left to ask questions
Right.
about them actually witnessing
And-
history. I wish my grandparents were alive and I could ask them, how much did you know about the Japanese internment camps that were in Tooele in the desert? I
Well-
don't know that they knew anything about it because
My
they
mom-
never
my
talked
mom,
about it.
I've asked my mom about it. But you know why it happened? Because it was the Japanese who attacked Pearl Harbor. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys remember after 9/11, how much hatred and violence happened to Arabic people, innocent Arabic people,
Yes.
after 9/11.
Well, I'll be
There's a
honest.
lot of
One of my
stuff that
concerns about 9/11 was, were they going to do the same thing? Was the
Right.
government going to run out and start grabbing up people of Arabic descent? And I had a couple of friends that were
yeah.
one was Jordanian, one was Arabic. I've got a friend who's Egyptian, who's a doctor, and he's back in Cairo now. But my thought was, oh my gosh, these guys that I care about are possibly going to get wrapped up in this. This is terrible. There was a guy in Arizona who was shot. He was a Sikh, and the person just thought he was Arabic because he was an idiot, doesn't know the
Yeah.
difference between a Sikh and an Arab. But it just, Sikhs and Arabs don't wear the same headgear, guys. I don't know if you knew that. Anyway, yeah, he shot him only because he was wearing a Sikh headdress. So
what I guess the question I'm really trying to ask guys is, I think the press has changed. Back then, it was more about the United States and supporting us, people here. Now, not all the reporters were doing that, but I think the general feeling I got historically was that it was more about raw USA, support the country, even if it violates some of the press rules or what we were taught in school, especially during crisis periods. Now, that changed, and maybe it was a good thing it changed in some ways, but especially like you're saying about 9/11. I know right after 9/11, there was pressure put almost immediately on the American people not to look at all Muslims that way, which is a good thing.
Right.
But
Well, when we were little kids, we experienced, we didn't really experience, but that society experienced the Vietnam War. And if you guys remember your history books, journalism changed a lot in the reporting of the Vietnamese War or Vietnam War versus what had happened in World War II. And it was very critical. War. So if you remember, there's a
news
very
sources.
Famous.
You went from a newspaper
very famous
to TV.
There's a very famous photo of a little Vietnamese girl running out of an area that had just been napalm bombed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the guy that took that video or that picture, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? This little 8-year-old buck naked girl running the hell out of a napalm fire. They never, ever reported anything like that during World War II. And they started doing that during Vietnam. And it completely changed Americans' perspective in regards to military conflict.
I think there were a couple things too going on, guys, as well. I agree, Sean, what you just said. I think also too, there was some radicalism on U.S. campuses, but those students really weren't in the press at that time, right? And so,
no, it was still the Walter Cronkites of the world,
right,
that had gone from
legitimate
reporting like they did in World War II to Vietnam, which was a complete 180.
Yeah,
but
and it wasn't until the 80s.
I feel like, and maybe it's because during that time there weren't as many sources as there are today, but I felt like back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 50s, the reporting was from more knowledgeable people. They seem to know more of things and what's going on as what happens today. And again, it could also be because we went from like newspapers to radio to 3 TV channels to a gazillion billion. Who knows?
The news comes out so fast right now. I'm not certain that the facts are properly vetted the way that they probably tried to vet things. It would take them days to do that versus, hey, this is happening right now, and this is what we see, and then
who can get it first?
Well, I remember when the New York Times and the Washington Post were respected newspapers, not just by liberals, but by conservatives as well. I think that I remember the days where not every Sunday morning, my dad would half naked. Well, he was he was out in his underwear out in the front yard, picking out the newspaper because he couldn't wait to get that sports section and listen and read about BYU and their miraculous 500-yard passing games, Brent, because that was all that happened in the 80s. You remember that?
It's true.
But he would always make me read the A section, which was the news section, and then also a little of the B section because sometimes it would run over. But and then he'd want me to read the editorials. So, and he wanted us older kids to do that. And I mean, I think I learned a lot from that. And then it became a habit. And then news on TV was just a supplement. And I think that might be part of
something that happened between that morning and that.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Sean. I think it gave you time to digest everything and put it in perspective.
My dad
now we're getting bombed, just hammered all day long.
When you think about it, Paul Harvey was like the OG of podcasts.
Yeah.
Wasn't part of the station. He was just on the radio.
How did the rest of the story?
How did he end that? He would always end it, good day.
Yeah.
That's the rest of the story.
I remember going to see we would spend time with my grandmother on her little hobby farm in central Utah. And every morning we'd get up and Paul Harvey was on the radio.
Paul Harvey was a treasure.
That was fun. That was fun.
Remember that on road trips every morning. You flip it on to the radio, try and tune it in and find a Paul Harvey in there somewhere. And the OG of podcasts.
Did you ever say he was? Did you ever at that time think, oh, I wonder how much of what Paul Harvey is saying is propaganda or how much of it's activism or no, you never did. But now you can't get through the news without wondering. So are there are there some sources that you guys trust or believe in more than others, or some that you just would laugh at if versus, yeah, I love these guys, but these guys over here are jokers? Or do you have some opinions on that?
A few years ago, they did this big kind of like one of those T graphs, those graphs like that, where they'd put like this was conservative on the right side, left side was liberal, and then all the news sources that were right in the middle, straddling either side. This leans a little right, this leans a little left, but not
More
enough
towards the center. Yeah.
right. I think they're right about that because it's, I mean, well, they have
Question is,
to,
who put that together?
well, yeah,
mean-
well, obviously more a computer AI in the future, probably. But I think though that, for example, right now I showed you guys a link. There's a company that's doing an app called Grounded, I think it's called. And what they're trying to do on every story is give it one of those ratings. Like, we found some errors here, but then on the other hand, this side was editorializing. This is more of an editorialization rather than facts. And this one's more of facts than
My question
someone's
is
opinion.
then, well, who's behind that? That's
Well, and
always
that's
my
obviously
concern. That's always
gonna,
my
that's
question.
always going to be,
I know.
that's always going to be an issue.
But you can see something like that and you can pick it apart yourself and say, okay, I agree with this. And a person who's somewhat well-read is going to be able to look at those things and figure out whether or not they're being truthful.
Yeah.
But
how is a
but
show like The
in order to
Voice
become
still
that,
on?
what's that?
How is a show like The Voice still on TV?
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah.
The
honestly.
Voice. Isn't that
not The Voice, but what's it
Isn't that
called?
the
with
singing competition?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
it
you're
is.
talking
What's
about The View.
The
Four
View.
Ladies.
Oh,
That's
The View. I mean,
What
it's
was that?
it's
That'd be like a
editorial.
bus.
It's a complete editorial, but you can't tell me anybody that watches that thinks
That's
that it's
not
anything
news.
but an editorial.
Yeah.
Right.
There are
Right, that's
people
not
that
news.
do. There are people that
Well,
think that's the hard
I
standing
know.
news right
I don't
there.
think they're very bright.
Well,
not.
it's like TikTok. It's not the
But
man.
it's the same thing as Fox. I mean, you go watch that guy's
I
name,
know.
Sean Hannity. Watch
Yeah.
the Sean Hannity thing. He's a freaking blowhard for the Republican Party.
Well, you
So
see,
it's no different than The View. It's just one side of the coin versus the other.
well, I remember that all started back in the 80s. Remember the McLaughlin report? So you would
Oh,
have,
yeah, on PBS.
that was actually really good.
It was good,
Uh,
but it was also a little nutty. They had some
Well,
nuts on there.
But then the
But
other thing was
Phil
when they-
Donahue, you remember him?
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
The OG
That
of
dude
talk
was a
shows.
freaking liberal nut job.
Jerry Springer.
Yeah.
Or what
Yeah.
was the guy that looked in he's on Fox now, but the guy that opened up the tomb, Geraldo.
Rivera.
When Fox hired him, I was like, hiring.
If he
he's
didn't
a
get
nut.
punched in the nose, he'd be nowhere. That's the only
Exactly.
reason why.
He got hit in the nose with a chair, didn't he?
Fist got
Uh,
punched in the face.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
Well, I think too, sometimes you just have to use your gut and try to remember, like, I think Brent said it last night to me. I think you sent me a quote, something about a lot of times news is your own bias. You believe whichever side
Yeah.
your bias lies on.
Right.
And I think, Sean, you said it right at the beginning of this discussion that sometimes you've just got to be mature enough to step outside that what do they call those? Glass chamber that you create, or a echo
Your
chamber?
box, whatever
Your
box
box,
that you
yeah.
live in. Yeah.
Right. You've got to step outside the echo chamber of things that you like to hear, reasons why you want to dislike or hate one side, and just kick back and say, okay, let's look at this logically instead of emotionally.
So
And
do you need to be somewhat uncomfortable during a
Yeah.
newscast to?
I
Well,
think so.
I think what
I
you
think
need
there's
to
something
do,
to that.
and I think what you have to do is first stop and think and say, all right, why am I hearing this?
Mhm.
And then go from there. Why?
Yeah.
Why would I need?
Is there
hear this?
something underneath the sheets that they're pushing?
Exactly.
Like I don't know. Back in when George Bush was president and he was pushing the war. I mean, there's a lot, like with the whole there's mass weapons of mass destruction. Well, that turned out to be a freaking lie.
It did. Even right now with this Israeli conflict, as this is going on and this news is being shoved in our face, here are billions of dollars being sent to the Ukraine, and their president is doing like a PayPal.
He's using Israel as an
and
excuse to send money to their Ukraine, which is really interesting.
Yes.
Like, okay, they have nothing to do with each other.
Well, the press, I think right now the press has completely lost any credibility since 2016 when Trump won the election. They have gone
when they lost their
crazy and illogically, emotionally. I mean, both sides are just bankrupt when it comes to trying to present truth. I can't believe anything politically anymore. And I mean, look at the example during the 2020 election with Biden. No one in the mainstream press took at all credible Hunter Biden's briefcase and the fact that Joe was possibly getting a payoff from Ukraine. Well, guess China. What we're involved in now? You know what I'm saying? Brent's right. We are paying. We're
Trump
still
was
giving them billions of
he
dollars.
was impeached over a phone call to the Ukraine.
Yeah,
that's not.
Was telling them
Shady.
They don't get any money.
And the Russian, the whole Russian, there were the parts about how he was in cahoots with some Russian agents or whatever, and it turns out that
it was false.
Hillary Clinton actually paid them for the information. Okay, I mean, no, it's not good. But okay, so I asked a question a little while ago. Are there places where you guys feel like you can go where there's some intellectual honesty? They strip away the emotion and just put things out there as fact, or is there literally no place you can
outside
look?
the United States?
So one of the things that I like to, and that I think that's legitimate.
U.S. politics. I listen to I read English newspapers.
There you go. That's what I do.
Israeli.
So I like reading the Daily Mail from England. It's actually pretty decent, and what's really cool is that you see stuff about both Republicans and Democrats being idiots, and it's
because they think we're idiots in the United States.
I mean, that's because we don't. That's because we wasted a whole shipload of tea.
Who's that guy, Piers? What's his name? The guy, English guy.
Piers Morgan. Piers Bronson. Piers Morgan.
You know what? He gets criticized, but he has pro-Palestinian people on, even though he disagrees with them, almost every night. I mean, that dude.
I like him.
He sometimes gets his butt handed to him, but at least the guy's got.
Yeah, he gets criticized, justly so, for some things. I disagree with him on some things. He's an adamant Second Amendment hater.
Yeah, he does.
He's a Brit, so he doesn't think in it. And I 100% disagree with him on that stuff. But there are other things that are liberal causes that he will rip up and down. And
look at Russell Brand. He's British too.
Yeah.
And Brand was starting to watch his podcast, and the U.S. press didn't like it because he was calling him on their shit.
Right.
He was saying, you guys are lying. And they're like, let's find something to
let's find some dirt on him.
So with Brand, though, I like a lot of the stuff that he says, but I also understand that he's very strong to the right. And I lean more to the right.
That's a change because he was big time lib. And I mean, coming from England, that's
Hollywood and
and
maybe he had to be like that to get gigs. Well, not be blackballs.
Well, there are people that claim that if you aren't left leaning, that you won't get anything, which is really interesting because I don't know if you guys paid attention to history class, but if you remember McCarthyism, do you know the term McCarthyism?
Yeah.
So
everybody was
running around
accused
accusing everybody of being communists.
Right.
I mean, that was
and if he didn't like it, and that was Hollywood, he was going through Hollywood and blaming all of them. And
so but it's just flipped. Instead of them chasing out liberals and communists, now they're chasing out conservatives.
I think we've got to stop though. We got to stop labeling it just leftist and conservatives, because I mean, I would say Tucker,
Russell Brand.
Trump and Brand and Tucker. I think they're more populist. I mean, Tucker's just on a level all his own.
Yeah,
And
I would
then
agree with that.
then you've got
It's
people,
it's definitely more complicated than left and
yeah,
right.
and then you've
And
got conservative Republican conservatives that are pro-war, like that Graham guy out in South Carolina. And then you've got like this guy FDR or Robert Kennedy Jr.
Junior,
He's a progressive, but he's not like
he's an
he's
old
not like
school
the
Democrat.
crazy.
yeah,
He's an
not
old school Democrat. He wants, yeah, and that's why he's getting a lot of support. I think he
Yeah.
has a chance of really
it's
causing
also
some
why
trouble.
he's getting a lot of pushback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I think that a lot of, like, Tucker Carlson, he made his name not from the way he leans, but because he wasn't afraid to call people out for doing wrong things. And that's what
yeah,
the news should do. The news should be calling out people for making incorrect
They
choices.
should be,
he
but
was
they
telling his
don't.
corporate overlords to get
That's why he got
screwed at the
fired.
Fox. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
he got caught lying about something too. I don't remember what
No,
it was.
Got
no,
caught
it was
telling the truth is what it was,
it was that he was sexually harassing his women on his staff. That's the reason.
which is what Russell Brand got accused of, which is what,
Convenient.
yes, absolutely. It's what they do. It's, you know what?
You
If you're a
can't
white
question
male
that,
and you're in the
Sean.
press,
You can't question a victim
that's the
ever.
thing that they're going to throw at you is sexual harassment or racism that will get
Mhm.
you axed off the air quickly and make you disintegrate to nothing.
It's all true until it's proven wrong.
Well,
So you can smear someone's reputation from here to kingdom come, but then, oh boy, when it's finally revealed that was all a lie, it's too late. They're off the air already.
unfortunately, there's a lot of
Right.
examples of people who have claimed victimhood, and it's not been true. But I do believe that most of that stuff is. I think that there's a lot less of the false allegations that turn out to be
Well,
false
it's
than
all
but-
I'm
but
saying
we've
is
seen
it's
that happen
convenient
more.
that Brand gets
people deserve their day in court.
Yeah. Like
How long ago
remember
were those accusations, Brand? How long ago were the Brand accusations? They
few
were
months
years
ago.
ago.
a couple months ago?
Just
Yeah,
a
No,
couple
no.
months.
I
But
mean,
they-
when they happened,
Years
when they
ago.
happened,
Years. Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And and it all happened with that Supreme Court nominee that I mean, they were accusing him of stuff that happened when he was in college
Well,
30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But what happens is if you go against the narrative, they will do everything to tear you down. If you remember Joe Rogan, when he talked about him taking they said, oh, Joe's promoting taking horse pills. Well, that isn't what he did.
Horse
He took
dewormer.
Yeah, he took a prescription that has been prescribed over 1 billion times.
Yeah, for 50 years.
Well,
So
yes,
yes,
but it
it's
was against the
true
narrative.
that, he was taking something that was classified as a horse dewormer, but it's also been prescribed for people for 50 years. So
Yeah.
it's
And it went
it's
against the
telling a
narrative. It went
little white
against
lie,
COVID.
right?
It went against the vaccine.
Yep.
It went
Yep.
against it. So let's shut him down. Hey, he's promoting the wrong thing.
Right.
He's no doctor. He's going to kill you. No.
John Stossel, you remember John Stossel? I love
I
watching
love
John
John
Stossel.
Stossel.
He has an actual interview. This was before the election, and after the election, he brought it up again, where he was interviewing a former staffer of Joe Biden when he was senator back in the 80s. And Joe sexually tried to molest her in a tunnel
I don't
by the
believe that.
Capitol.
I don't believe
Grabbed
that.
her. Yeah,
Grabbed
he grabbed her
Underneath
breast.
the breast,
Yep.
breast
Mhm.
and then tried to get his finger underneath her pants.
Did
Now,
he s-
you tell me what's that guy you were talking about that's related to the Vanderbilts? When did he come out on MSNBC or CNN and talk about that story right during the election? Oh, but Trump's and I believe it. I believe Trump probably harassed her, took
I don't think
advantage of
anybody
the
denies
situation.
that.
No,
I don't think
but it's just so convenient who they pick as a winner and who they pick as the loser, and it's all controlled by that media, that the ones that decide who gets the airtime. It's hard to believe. I have a real hard time taking anything they say seriously.
By the way, Anderson Cooper, his mother is Gloria Vanderbilt.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Stupid Vanderbilts. They have a
Isn't
nice university, though.
isn't she Vanderbilt? Isn't she
Railroad.
Yeah,
is that where they
railroad,
made
baby.
their money? I thought she was like
Railroads.
On the backs of poor people.
Yeah,
You bet.
Vanderbilt was all railroads. They
on
built the
back
railroad
of
system.
on the backs of the Chinese.
Hey, on a side
Yeah.
note, do you guys understand? You guys know how Vanderbilt University came about? Or no, wait, I take it back. I'm getting mixed up.
No, I
Stanford.
didn't know.
I get Stanford and Vandy mixed up.
Is it Stanford?
Yeah, the family, their boy or whatever couldn't get into Harvard or into Yale, so they basically started their own university. Stanford.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
King
Nice.
Henry VIII. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
What have you been in the Vanderbilt
The
museum in
Commodore.
Asheville? Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I went through that.
You got a bowling alley inside.
And the McDonald's has a grand piano in it.
Grand piano
nice.
in there. It's like the
Yeah.
nicest McDonald's you've ever been.
Cool.
Asheville's an
Crazy.
awesome city. Anyway, sorry.
It is pretty.
Ventured off
Anyway.
there, as I normally
Well, so what do we do about
I
this,
don't
guys?
have a trusted source.
Well,
I really
honestly, I think talking about is a good thing, but also recognizing and then promoting people that that you think are genuinely honest and things that they talk about. So I mean, I can give you a couple examples of sources that I use that I trust more than others. If you're interested,
Yeah. well,
so
sure.
Reason Magazine, reason.com is, I think, pretty good about things. The Cato Institute is really good. You mentioned John Stossel. I think he's one of the most honest people that journalism has had in the last
He's not a
50
conservative.
years. No, he's
Yeah.
not. But he's not a liberal either.
No,
He'll rip
I don't
everybody.
know what he is.
John Stossel.
He's John Stossel. He'll rip anybody if they deserve it. Mrs.org is really good. Who's really interesting to listen to if you get him outside of his magic show is Penn Jillette. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
yeah.
ever listened to him talk about things, but man, that dude is so brilliant and so smart and so
Intelligent
well
guy.
read. It's not even funny. When I first came across him and some of his stuff that didn't have anything to do with magic, I couldn't believe how smart he was and how just well read and informed he was. So
You know who I really liked, and I know he's gone, but Brinkley. That was one guy I always liked listening to
Christy?
because
She's
no,
not
the
gone.
older guy, not
What do you
Christy
mean?
Brinkley.
she's like
the older
hot
Brinkley.
and 70.
No, the old, not you guys, not the bikini. I know you're thinking that. No, it was the older dude, the Brinkley.
An
he has a
older
son,
dude wearing
too.
a bikini?
That's
Well,
really
that was
gross.
Russert.
Any
too.
weird news like that?
Russert before he died of a heart
Very
attack. I
unusual.
always liked hearing him.
Tim Russert
Right.
in a bikini?
Shut up, you two dorks! Come on now,
Interesting news
David
sources you have
Brinkley.
there.
David Brinkley. That's who
Oh.
I was thinking about. So
I'm confused.
Christy Brinkley. Oh man, no
Christy
news
Brinkley
there.
was fabulous at delivering the news.
You know who? Okay, I don't always agree with her. Who's the blonde one that got in Trump's grill during the debate? And she used to be on Fox. Now she went to CNN. Now she does her own show. What's her name?
No idea. Oh,
Yeah,
I know
she's
who you're
really-
talking about, but I can't remember her name.
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I respect the
she's-
fact that she took her lumps and gave it. I think she gave it back to Trump pretty good too. I was impressed. I know
She did.
I think the Trumpies get really uptight if anybody goes after Trump. I personally don't care. I didn't support him in the beginning anyway.
It's good to
It's
see
good.
any
It's good.
journalist going after any politician, every single
Yeah.
one. And that's honestly, that's what we should see. Like, what do they call it? The fourth estate or whatever. I can't remember. We need honest journalism so that we can hold people in power accountable, whether it's politicians or powerful corporate people. It's important. And I think we're lacking that. And hopefully
I
people
think
can overcome it.
I think Sean bringing up a couple different sources that you can go to. I think, of course, we all have to look into that ourselves. But I think one thing too in social media would help is if we didn't immediately, and I know Brent, you like to have some fun sometimes on your Facebook, and some people get really irate and upset. I've noticed, and
I know what
I
you're talking
used
about.
to, yeah, you do it on purpose a little bit, but they stir the pot, as I call it, pot stir. But
Usually he
you,
smokes it.
but in election time, Facebook becomes unbearable, and I've in the last few years have just decided not to really participate very often. And if I do participate, I've noticed sometimes I've posted emotionally and then I have to pull it, or I am intelligent about it and really look it over carefully before posting it. And those I'm proud of, and those I'll keep on there. So I guess my commitment is just to try to abstain from um, being a problem, being the
I'll tell
reason that
you,
Don't post
one way,
reactively. Don't do
right,
anything in a
yeah,
reaction.
and
right,
I think one way to weed out all the junk is if news organizations, whether you're a website, whether you're a cable news network, even Facebook or what you're reading, do not ever post a news story by an anonymous source. That has
no,
got to
geez,
stop. If you're
that's
not
got to
willing to
stop.
put your name behind a story, how
Yeah,
can you trust that? How do you know where the source is from? And so many times these anonymous source comes out with a story here and a story there that's damning to somebody. Stop that.
destroys their lives. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm okay. I mean, someone said that. Well, you can't have people who have sexually harassed publicly come out, which isn't true because if they're right and it did happen,
It
there's
needs to
ways
be
you can
known.
prove it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
why did you
frankly,
wait until this moment to bring it
right,
forth? Like,
because
why didn't you do it when it happened?
well,
Why
it
do you wait
hurts the whole
20, 25
hurts the
years?
whole movement. It
Yeah.
hurts the whole movement because
Yeah.
then we look at it and go, well, for exactly the reason you're talking about. Well, why did you come out 20 years later? Why? And then, but if there's a face, if someone's brave enough to stand up and say, yeah, this happened 20 years ago.
Right.
I was scared. Here's why I didn't do it. Because there is some truth. Abusers do intimidate victims a lot of times, and victims are scared to come out. And I don't have a problem, but get an attorney, attorney up, and go out and get in front of the public and say, yeah, this happened. Okay. You're going to get some death threats. We can send the police out to investigate those. Most of those are bogus anyway. No one's really going to kill you most of the time. I guess there are some legitimate issues that you got to worry about if you become a public figure like that. But my gosh, I mean, like the whole Epstein Island thing, there's some brave
Yeah.
people that went on John Stossel and a couple of these others, and young ladies that talked about, of course, the press ignored some of those stories, but I respect that. And my gosh, if one of the people I support get caught, like there's this guy Tim Ballard. I was promoting his show and talking all about how great a guy he was, and then there was some anonymous reports that he sexually harassed people, and at first I was very skeptical, and then one of them did come public, and then another one, and I'm like, well, good for those women. And I also felt bad on you, Tim. That's disgusting that you did that. Now, it doesn't mean what he did was terrible as far as saving young people from abuse, but I'm just, it makes a big
Change your
difference to
perception of
me.
them.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Like this Russell
Yeah.
Brand accusers, come out in public then. If he did this 20 years ago, come out in public and
Yeah.
tell your
Why do you
story.
do it when his newscast begins to come forward? Like, why didn't you do it when he started making money as an actor? Why didn't
It's
you
all-
do it when he was doing drugs and all that?
Well,
stuff?
that
I
always
mean,
makes it a little bit questionable when things come out 20 years after the
Yeah.
fact. What's your motivation?
or
Did this? I
look,
mean,
if you got paid hush money and you accepted the hush money, that's on you.
Oh,
And-
you mean
and-
the
and-
stripper with Trump? Yeah. Yeah. And then her attorney ends up in jail. That's what's funny. What a scumbag.
I mean, look, if you're going to accept millions of dollars to keep your story quiet at the time that it happens, then when this person
Mhm.
starts to blow up, that makes you just as bad as they were. You accepted hush money from what happened to you, and now you're coming out. For what? More money? What was it all about? Was it all about the money?
Well, let's talk about what our kids, Sean, what would you recommend as far as how to share news stories? Because my mom, she'll just send emails. She'll be like, or telegraph, I guess it's called, telegram or whatever that one is that the government can't read. I'll all of a sudden get barraged with conservative news stories from my mom, like links.
Like, you think the government gives a crap about you reading different conservative?
No.
Your mom got a government watching her? Someone outside the house?
My point is, no one reads my mom's stuff she sends. Sorry, Mom. But
Karen, you got eyes on Karen. He's your own Karen here. All right,
I think
Karen, I'd read anything that you sent. I respect your opinion.
Well, I'm just being honest, Mom. But I think the better thing would be is to discuss it with your kids, right?
Well, I think you just have to have conversations. And then at the same time, without trying to, we talk about reporters putting their bias into their own stories. Have a conversation with your kids about things without putting your own
editorializing or opinionating.
Yeah. I mean,
that's hard.
I mean, there's a difference between trying to raise your children correctly, but and raising them to be able to think for themselves.
Right.
You know, it is something that schools don't seem to do nowadays, is teach people critical thinking skills. And that's one of the problems. People don't have those skills because they were never taught. And people base their opinions off of emotional whatever. And that's never good.
So does your wife just do the teaching? Because you just hang out because she's the therapist. But you do give a good speech, though, Sean. I appreciate that.
I would say that most things that I talk to my kids about are usually done through very logical and non-emotional methods. So,
Brent just talks to his through Facebook.
But you gotta remember too, though, like in talking to them, things were different than when we were kids. You got your news twice a day, 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Now, if something big happened, there was a cut-in special report. And when that happened, everybody stopped.
That was scary.
You always stopped and watched what happened.
Yeah.
But like you were talking about.
You don't see that much anymore, do you?
Never. I mean,
when's the last time you saw something cut in?
There's like if there's a shooting or something like
9/11 was the last time I remember.
And then everybody flocks to the cable channel or Twitter or
and then it's just you just get inundated with it nonstop. But
emotions,
like you were saying
people
earlier,
start
Carl,
using their emotions to spread whatever gobbledygook.
And today news goes so fast, like you were talking about earlier. It just comes at you like the minute it happens, it's being.
It's hard to digest.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's like the second that it happens, you got to be the first source that's out there. And we didn't have that. It would at least be a couple hours before the special report got interrupted. And they would put things together and they would put their scripts together and probably
remember when Reagan
and all that?
That first assassination attempt? I remember Carl Sandburg. We even stopped class, remember?
Yeah.
And we were watching on the TVs.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that.
First space shuttle went up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then I remember in high school when Challenger blew up or Columbia. It was just horrible. But
I remember when that plane crashed in Kearns in high school.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. That was a big deal.
I have no recollection of that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't remember that?
No.
I remember that.
Yeah, just the big events. But well, guys, hey, it's been a fun night tonight. I think hopefully someone that's listening tonight realizes that
Dad Bods is the only source for news. I think that's what most people will understand.
Maybe the news isn't as terrible as we think it is, because I know a lot of people that just give up and just stop listening completely. And I don't know if that's good either. I think, though, like Sean made some good points about finding some sources that you're really comfortable with. Maybe, and then every once in a while, push yourself to listen to a side or view that you normally wouldn't support.
You should listen to different sources that you might not necessarily agree with, but specifically because they're going to say something that the other side that maybe you do agree with isn't going to talk about. And it's important to know both sides of those things.
I've had that happen to me. So I was reading one of Brent's posts one time, and I of course agree with Brent most of the time.
'Cause
And
I'm right.
so I went in because one of your friends posted something that was just like, I was like, what a dumbass. So I went in and started reading up on the other side, but then all of a sudden things started changing a little bit. I'm like, ooh, I didn't really look at this very carefully. And then like the whole WMD in Iraq. Okay, it took a while before we found out it was a bunch of lies. But I why Pal's pretty upset at George Bush Senior Jr. because he was pushed onto a stage and lied before the entire world. I believed all that BS at the time. Now
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't trust any of it. And should I have trusted? And they were saying that was a lie back then, and I wasn't listening to that side. I was blocking them out. I didn't want to hear their side. I wanted to hear my side, which was, let's go kill those Iraqis.
Right.
It was wrong. Wrong.
I said earlier there's really nothing that I ever listened to as far as news, but that was actually incorrect because I forgot on Sunday mornings, I always watch CBS Sunday morning news.
I remember
And
when you always watch Jon Stewart. He's driving me crazy.
I did watch Jon Stewart for a while, but CBS Sunday morning is these feel-good stories all the time.
Yeah.
To me, that's the news that I like to hear, away from the mumble jumble, the violence. Is just feel-good stories. And a couple days ago, our good friend Marty posted a really, really good feel-good story. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it was a lady who had gone through like a garbage. Well, she looked in a garbage can and found somebody's military uniform in there. And she dug it out and wanted to find whose uniform this was. And all she had was just the last name. And so she was searching and searching, couldn't find anything on it. 2 years went by, and she was able to find the obituary of the soldier. And he had killed himself. He suffered from PTSD, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, I believe it was. I could be mistaken. But more importantly, he had a son that was left behind who had this void that was left in him with the loss of his father. And so this story showed her showing up to this place 1,000 miles away with the uniforms and surprising this boy with uniforms of his father, a cherished piece of something that he can hold on to.
That's cool.
And to me, those are like,
that's a good story.
Those are news stories to me. Those are great stories to me.
Yeah. Well,
hey guys, one
hear that.
thing, I love this topic this week because next week we're going to be talking to a guy who had an amazing experience. He's coming in from Sean. Sean's family, Alan, I think, is a friend of his. He has an amazing story. I don't want to give too much of it away, but he has this incredible near-death experience. And one of the things he talks about is actually the news. And the heavenly person he was referring to, or his guide, actually gave some advice. And I didn't want to bring any of it up that I heard because I want to save it for next week.
Wow,
But
I had no idea. I'm
this is an
excited.
incredible story. Yeah, incredible story. And I don't think this is giving away too much. He was clinically dead for 45 minutes in a body bag and was revived.
Which is unbelievable. Crazy. How does that happen?
His body temperature was 77 degrees when they got him to the hospital.
Wow.
It's amazing.
I mean,
that's
like really dead.
That's like rigor mortis stuff.
Rigor mortis had set in. Yeah. And anyway, it's an incredible story. I won't say anything else, but I've read his book. He has one book out. He has another book coming in December. And my parents will be listening to this, so we better be on good behavior next week.
Fucking A.
My dad was really fascinated.
Oh, we don't want Kent getting at us, getting mad.
Oh, no, you don't want Kent.
Actually, I'm more afraid of your mom.
My mom's tougher. Yeah, that's true.
You'll just pass the phone away from me, Sean. You're in here.
Well, my dad's a little bony now, and he's a little. He doesn't drink enough milk, so you guys can take him now, I think. So.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah.
Anyway, hey,
let me know when I can take your mom.
Hey, audience, that's the one
right.
you've got to listen to. This next week, though, you guys do not want to miss this podcast. It's going to be one of the most incredible stories you hear. So
Cool.
And Brent, thanks for bringing that one up that Marty posted, because
It's a good one. You
really,
get a chance, take a look. It's a great story. It really is. Thanks, Marty.
Cool.
Great episode, guys, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Asta.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to Three Dad Bods, and make sure to catch their past episodes on Spotify, Apple, and Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure and leave a comment to help stroke their fragile egos.